Before we start this video at large, thank you to Jeremy, Carl, Oleski, Dor, Fallen, Makik, Luca, Isaro, and Francisco for their support on Patreon. I hope you guys enjoy the video. And as always, an immense thank you to Halo Burner for their continued support of the channel this month on Patreon. It is greatly appreciated, my friend, and I hope you enjoy this video. Hello everybody, today we're going to add the UI for our quick slot items. We're also going to make it so we can switch between a number of quick slot items. So think of like your flask, your health flask, and your mana flask, etc. So I'm going to go open up the player UI manager again. We're going to go to equipment manager. I'm going to duplicate one of our sets of items here. I'm just going to duplicate the weapons. I'm going to call it quick slot items. Now, for the quick slots. For the sake of the video, I'm going to do 3 slots, but if you guys want to do 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, the logic is the same, just basically change the numbers around to include more slots. But for the sake of the video and keeping it more streamlined, I'm just going to do the 3 slots. So I'm also going to add a few headers here, just to clean up the UI a little bit. I'm not going to spend much time on this, there you go. I just want to make it look a little bit more neat and presentable, as we have a lot of little equipment slots now, so it's best just to be able to see what's there instantly. Now, I encourage you to take the time and add little icons of these and make it look nice. I'm just keeping this dev UI for now for the sake of the tutorial series. So I'm going to change the right-hand weapon to quick slot 0, 1, and 2, and then I'm going to open up the player UI equipment manager. Okay, so I didn't add headers here for the armor and the projectiles. I'm going to do that real fast just so we can keep some semblance of organization here and keep everything nice. So we have weapon slots, armor slots, and then we have the projectile slots. And then lastly, I'm going to make a new header here for the quick slots item. Probably should have called this belt or something, because saying quick slot item quick slots is kind of funny, but we're here now, so I'm going to stick with the name. I'm going to copy everything from the projectile slots here, because we are going to use a counter on some of these, but now we'll make it so you don't have to use a counter, because I don't know if you remember in ELDEN or not, but tools can occupy this slot as well, and sometimes tools aren't consumable. You can reuse them. So most of the time, though, you will be using a consumable item, or rather an item with an amount. That could be recharged sometimes, sometimes not. So we will enable it for using an item with a counter and using an item with no counter. So I'm going to call this quick slot 01 equipment slot, quick slot 01 count, that's the number, and then the quick slot 01 button. So the equipment slot is just the image of the thing that's going there. The button is the button itself, which you interact with, and the count is the count of how many of these consumable objects you have. Okay, so I'm just going to do the same thing here for 2 and 3. Just going to copy it and paste it. Scroll down here on awake, you can see we're actually getting the buttons from the image by using get component and parent, and we're passing true because we're checking for inactive game objects. So I'm just going to do the same thing here for our quick slot buttons. Quick slot 01 button is equal to quick slot 01 equipment slot dot get component and parent button true. Do the same thing for 2 by saying quick slot 02 button is equal to quick slot 02 equipment slot get component and parent button true. And then lastly, the same thing with 03. Okay, cool. That looks good. So I'm just going to save this now, and let's scroll down a little bit here and see what else we can do. So here we have toggle equipment buttons. This is just going to set the status for a button to the active state that we passed for is enabled. So let's do the same thing here for all of our quick slot buttons that we have done for the other equipment buttons we have here. So quick slot 01 button, 02, and 03, the enabled status is equal to enabled. Now remember, this is for when you open up the second window to select an inventory item. You don't want to be able to go over and select your equipment slot buttons while you're selecting some from the inventory. All right, cool. Let's open up our enums because we need to add a new equipment type. And a gentleman mentioned in the last video that you don't want to move these around because it will change the number. And if you haven't even saved in your script, it will change the enum that it's referencing. So you can actually say equals and assign a number to each of these, and then that number will always be constant for them. I'm not going to do that because I'm never going to change the order of these. So I'm just going to keep it like it is. But I'm going to add quick slot 01, 02, and 03. And for me, since these values are on the 12, 13, and 14, their int values will be 12, 13, and 14. All right, looks good. Let's save that. And then let's jump over now back to the select last equipment slot used on the player UI equipment manager. We're going to make a case here for the quick slot 1, 2, and 3. And if it's quick slot 1, then the last button selected obviously is going to be quick slot 1's equipment button. And then you can do the same thing for 2 and 3. Now, I encourage you right now to pause the video and go and attempt to do the rest of this on your own, including making it so you can switch between up to 3 quick slot items. So again, great time to learn and to attempt some stuff. Pause the video, go give it a try on your own. Worst case scenario, you come back, you can watch the rest of the video, and you can see how I did it. I really encourage you to do it. It's great to get some experience and to attempt these things on your own. So go ahead and try that. Okay, back to the video. So let's go down here now, and we're going to check for our equipment slot icons here. So we're going to add a section for the quick slots. So we had the projectile equipment in the last video. We're going to add one for a quick slot item, and we're going to do quick slot item 01, 02, 03. Now, as of right now, there is no multiple quick slot items in your inventory. So let's go ahead and change that. Let's go to the player inventory manager real fast. And let's go over and add an array. So I'm just going to do the exact same thing I've done here for the weapons. I'm going to paste that, and we're going to make it an array of 3. Again, you can pick whatever numbers you want. I'm just going to use 3 just for the sake of the video and setting up 3 slots. Because if you know how to do a few, you can do as many as you want or as little as you want. So, quick slot items in quick slots. We're going to say quick slot item, and then of type quick slot item. So this is an array, and the array size is 3, so it's always constant at that. Now, let's look to where we actually use weapons in right-hand slots to get a good idea what's going on here. First, let's make an index for this. So like we have the right weapon, left weapon index. We're going to call this quick slot item index. There we go. And defaultly, it's at 0. And we can kind of look to other scripts and see what's going on and how we do this and kind of just copy it. So you could right-click on it and use find all references until you locate it, but I know that it's on the player equipment manager script, so I'm going to go over there right now. Now let's scroll down and let's see here. I'm going to get rid of this debug delete later. This is when we were, I think, prototyping the equipping armor before we had the UI, so let's get rid of that. We don't need that there anymore. Cool, looks good. Now, let's go down to wherever we have, I believe it's called load or switch right weapons. Switch right weapon, I think it's called. I'm going to make a comment here for quick slots because we're going to make one to switch our quick slot items. Yes, switch right weapon. All right, let's copy that and paste it right below here and change the function name to switch quick slot item or whatever you want to call it. So switch quick slot item. Now, we don't need to play an animation, so we're just going to go through this, and a lot of it won't make sense at the moment, but we're going to circle back if it doesn't. I mean, it might make sense right away, but let's delete this animation, don't need that. We're going to delete these comments, don't need that. Now, what this selected weapon here, this is going to become selected item, it's going to become a quick slot item. And we're going to use this if you want to basically make it so that if you have 2 or more quick slot items equipped, then you'll always skip the empty spaces. So I'm going to handle this like the weapon, where if you just have 1 quick slot item and you try to switch, it'll switch to an empty space. But if you always have 2 or more, you'll never get an empty space. So we're going to say player.player inventory manager quick slot item index. So basically right hand weapon index, wherever you find that, this now becomes quick slot item index. And we were using 2 because that's basically, if we go over that, then we know we're at the end. So let's see here. Weapon count becomes quick slot item count. And basically, wherever you have unarmed weapon, you're just going to check for null instead. Because weapons are never null. There's an unarmed weapon. It's never nothing there. But quick slots can indeed be null. So we're just going to say, instead of comparing it to an ID, and again, weapons in right-hand slots becomes quick slot items in quick slots. Well, we just made that array of 3 items. So weapons in right-hand slots, again, becomes quick slot items in quick slots, and we're comparing this to not unarmed. We're just going to compare it to null. So if it does not equal null, if there is an item there, then we get +1 to the item count. And then we see the first item is this item we found in the list. Okay, cool. So with that logic, it's pretty much identically the same as the weapons, if you want to set it up the same way, that is. And you're basically just going to replace unarmed weapon with a null check, and the right weapon index becomes the quick slot index, and the current right-hand weapon becomes the current quick slot item, and the weapons in right-hand slots becomes quick slot items in quick slots. Now, I just will take the time to go down and do this on video too, because it may be a bit confusing for some. Just in case, we're going to set the current quick slot item value not to unarmed, but to -1, which again will give us a null item because that doesn't exist in our database because it can never be a negative value. Then we're going to go to the first weapon and call this first item position instead. And then we're going to change this to current quick slot item ID is equal to first item.item ID. Cool. And that is good. Now, this, again, same thing. We're going to compare this to null instead. We're not checking weapons right-hand slots. We're checking quick slot items in quick slots. And then we're going to also check for the quick slot index, and we're not going to compare it against an unarmed weapon. We're going to compare it to see if it's not null. So no item ID either. If the quick slot item is not null, then the selected item is going to be equal to quick slot items in quick slots, and then we pass the quick slot item index. And then we are going to set the current quick slot item ID to the item in the player's inventory quick slots, passing the quick slot index. So again, identical to how we did weapons way back when. It is exactly the same. There we go. And we're going to change this to quick slot item. Okay, cool. All right, we're going to jump back this in a moment. I'm going to quickly erase this last bit. This needs to become a quick slot item instead of a weapon, but we'll jump back to that in a sec. For now, let's go over to the Player UI Equipment Manager, and let's continue on over here. Let's go back down here where we stated we were looking for our quick slot items, but it didn't exist yet. So player inventory manager dot quick slot, or rather quick slot items in quick slots, and we're going to pass 0 first for number 1. And I'm just going to, instead of referencing the second projectile equipment, we're just going to reference the quick slot 01 equipment. And we're going to reference the quick slot equipment, and we're going to set it to quick slot 01's equipment slot. So I'm just going to basically replace all of the stuff that we copied here with the new quick slot 01. And now there's a thing we got to do is a little bit different for the count. We'll get to that in a sec though. So just down here, also change up the equipment slot being enabled and the count as well. So how do we get the count? Because if I just use the quick slot equipment here, you're going to see it's going to throw me an error because not all quick slot items are going to have a count. So if I were to just put this here like so, there's no current ammo amount because it's not ammo. There's actually no current anything amount. What type of amount? You can see there's nothing here. So like I said, not all will have them. So go to your quick slot base class. Let's make a header here now for consumable, I guess we can call this, or you can call it has count, whatever you want. I'll call it consumable. We're going to make this very straightforward, very simple. Let's make a public bool for is consumable, defaultly to true. I'm sure most items will be, so we'll set that defaultly to true. And now I'll make a comment here. Not all quick slot items are consumable. Again, think of like tools in Elden Ring. They're not always consumable. Now, I'm going to make a public virtual int. And the int is going to be get current amount. And this is just going to be used to get the item amount left on the item. And we're doing this through a virtual method because it will be different depending on your items. With special cases, think of like our flasks, for example, since we have to save them as network variables. We have to keep them on our player network manager. But something like a throwing knife, you wouldn't really need to keep any information on that. At least not for the count. Now, let's go over to the flask item, because I believe this is the one we have right now. Let's override get current amount. And now you could, through some means, get the player here and reference the player network manager. But now that I'm thinking about it, we can just make this require a variable of player anyway and do it that way. So we're going to say current amount is equal to 0, and if this is a health flask, we get the current amount by referencing your player somehow through here. And then we're going to go to the player network manager and then get the current health flask amount. So let's go back to the base class and let's make this require a player variable, like so. Now go back to the flask item, make that require a player so it matches. Now we're going to say player.player network manager. If there's a health flask, we're going to get the remaining health flask.value. Dot value. We're going to say current amount is equal to. There we go. Now, if it's not a health flask, you can do an else here, where you can just simply paste this, put an exclamation point. If it's not a health flask, then it must be a mana flask. So it's going to be mana flasks. And this is not Nephilim, and I keep getting my variables mixed up. This is called focus points, I believe, because this is Elden Ring and Unity. Let's see. Remaining focus points flasks. Cool. And then we can return the current amount. And that's it. Now we can go back over to our player UI equipment manager. We can say quick slot equipment. We have to see first if it's actually a consumable. So we say if quick slot equipment dot is consumable, then we're going to set the count to true, and we're going to get the count. Otherwise, we're going to set the count to false. So the count is equal to quick slot equipment dot get current amount, and then we pass that to string. And we need to pass a player. So we already have that here luckily, so we're fine to do so, just like that. Now, if it is not a consumable, you don't want an item count to be displayed. That would be kind of silly. So you can just say else, and then you can disable the item count. So I can just copy this here. Quick slot 01 count dot enabled just becomes false. All right, cool. Now we can save that. And we can copy this and do the exact same thing for 2 and 3. So like this. Now, for some of you who don't like to repeat code, you could make a nice getter function for these and basically condense this past the quick slot item and then past the text and such that's going to be changed or enabled or disabled. And you could basically not repeat this code 3 times if you don't want to. You could even do the same with the weapons. I just like having it in one function like this. I don't know why, but I know some people just like having it condensed. But I find this is easier to read because when you overly condense it, at least to me, it becomes a bit not clear at first glance. But by all means, write how you think it's going to be as clear to you and your team. So let's say case equipment type quick slot 01, 2, and 3. We're going to attempt to load quick slot inventory. And this doesn't exist yet, by the way. We're just making this here because we're going to write this function immediately after. So case 2 and case 3, quick slot 1, 2, and 3, load quick slot inventory. All right, let's copy load projectile inventory and let's paste it right below it and then change the name to load quick slot inventory. And then we can change a few things here and we're on our way. Okay, so we're going to get a list of quick slot items instead of projectile items in your inventory. That's the big one right away. So a list of quick slot items. I'm going to copy the variable, paste it over here, and the name isn't going to be projectiles in inventory. It's going to be quick slot items in inventory. Again, basically wherever you see range projectile item as a variable, change that to quick slot item as variable. And wherever you see the word projectile, change that to quick slot item. And that's basically it. Beyond that, we're good. The rest of the code is identical. It's just going to check for a first selected button. If you don't have any of those inventory items in your inventory, it's going to go back. So we're good. Save that. Now, down under unequip selected item, this is what we're going to do if we try to remove it from our equipment screen and put it back in our inventory. Copy our secondary projectile or whatever we did last. Make a case for quick slot, you guessed it, 1, 2, and 3. So, equipment type, quick slot 01. Player inventory, we're going to reference the quick slot items, and we're going to pass 0 because this is the first entry in the array. If the item is not equal null, we're going to add it to our inventory, and then we're going to set this item to null, like so. Now, if you're using the netcode, you can set it to -1. That will change automatically, but I'm just going to do both, just for whatever reason here, but you don't need to. I'm going to do it for both in case anybody watching this video did it either way. So you could make a load quick slot equipment, and I'm going to show you why you don't need to do that, but you could. It's also valid, but I'll show you 2 different ways, as I do with a lot of things. We're going to say if player inventory.quick slot item index is equal to 0, then we know we need to refresh our current quick slot item because this is the one we're currently unequipping. So we could say player.player network manager current quick slot item.value is equal to -1. Alternatively, you could make a load quick slot function and pass that, and you could do a check there saying if the index is equal to this item, whatever, then you renew it at -1. But it's just kind of redundant for what we have right now, so I'll just keep it this way. But again, however way you want to do it, whatever makes more sense to you, do it that way. Copy and paste, the same thing for 2 and 3. If your index matches the item you're unequipping, you have to refresh your current equipped quick slot item by setting the network ID to -1. -1 being a null item, meaning nothing will load. Cool, save that, looks good. Now jump over to the player UI prefab and let's drag in some of our variables here for the item icons. And I don't have a text here for my item amount, so I'm just going to yoink that from the projectile slots by just opening them up here and copying it. And because the way anchors are set up, we just right click and paste this to child, it goes right to the bottom corner. Do the same thing for 2 and 3. And then drag those into the variable like so. All right, cool, that looks good. Let's save this prefab. And let's actually go over to the menu and disable it first. There we go. Now, go to player controls. We need to make an input for switching our quick slot items. I'm going to copy the switch left or right weapon input, duplicate it because it's already set to the D-pad. I'm going to say switch quick slot item, and I'm going to change the D-pad left or right to a D-pad down on the gamepad. Again, if you're using mouse or keys, just whatever button you want to set it to, this is where you would do it. All right, cool. Close. Save. Go to the player input manager. Let's make an input for this. You guys have done this so many times by now. I'm sure you know what to do. Copy and paste switch left weapon input becomes switch quick slot item input. Go down to where we have our actions too. Where are my actions? Am I blind? Yes, I'm blind because I think they're right at the top. Yes, they are. Copy one of these here and change switch left weapon or whatever you copied to switch quick slot item. Change whatever input you copied to switch quick slot item input. Great. All right, now let's find a function that mostly resembles what we're going for. Copy it and then edit it. So handle switch right weapon input. That's good. Paste that right below. Switch right weapon input becomes switch quick slot item input. And then obviously the switch right weapon input flag becomes the switch quick slot item input flag. And instead of calling switch right weapon, we're going to call our newly created switch quick slot item. And all the checks are the same. Don't want to do this if I'm performing an action. Don't want to do this if I'm using an item. Don't want to do this if a menu window is open. So this is all good. Switch quick slot item. Now make sure we call this newly created function where we call all of our inputs. And I'm going to put it right alongside the switch weapon inputs, just like I have it down there right below in terms of function organization. I'm going to save that now, and we're going to go back to the player UI. And I'm going to go to the quick slot buttons as I forgot to set their equipment slot numbers. So I believe it's 12, 13, and 14. Let me check real fast. Yeah, 12, 13, and 14. So 12 for number 1, 13 for number 2, and then 14 for number 3. All right, once that's done, we can save the prefab again. And we need to go to our inventory slot now. And this is going to run some code when we try to equip something. So go to where we equip an item. And now let's go down to, again, copy. Last thing it was a secondary projectile. I'm just going to simply copy that, paste that, and we're going to change equipment type to quick slot 01. And this is very similar to de-equipping it. So get the first place in the array. Quick slot items 01 obviously is items in quick slots 0 because that is the first entry in the array. If the item does not equal null, we want to add it to our inventory. Yes, this is true. And then we're going to say player 0, quick slot item 0 equals current item as a quick slot item. So we're going to remove it from inventory. That's fine. Now we could make again a load function. You can go to this here if you want to. If you just want to keep the naming conventions still the same, you can paste this. You can say load quick slot equipment, but there's not a lot happening here outside of changing a network variable, which then changes our item. So you could do this here like this because it's kind of like just searching from an array. So I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to compare it and see, like we did with unequipping, if it is the current one in our slot. So if this is item 0 and our current quick slot item index is equal to 0, then we're going to say our current quick slot item value is equal to current item.id. So we're only changing that if it matches the current one that we're on. So for example, if you equip something in quick slot 2 and your index is on 2, you got to update the game and say, hey man, we're on index 2, so our current quick slot item has to be the one we just equipped. So copy and paste that, do that for quick slot items 2 and 3, then jump back over to the player equipment manager and we're under the switch quick slot weapon, or switch quick slot item. Copy what's inside the for each loop, and again, switch quick slot item is the function we're on, and paste it. So get rid of the for each and just take this if statement. Get rid of the return. What we're going to do here is make an else, and we're going to say if it does equal null, we're going to simply switch our player.player network manager current quick slot item value to -1 so it is a null, and then it will change accordingly. So let's save that, but now we got to change something on our player network manager. So jump over to on current quick slot item changed. You can see here we're checking for owners set quick slot. Just move this outside here, and if the current quick slot item does not equal null, we're setting the current quick slot item. Well, we need to do a couple more things here. We need to open up some brackets here. So if it's not null, we're going to set the current quick slot item to new quick slot item. Otherwise, we're going to say that the current quick slot item is equal to null. And we're going to save that. Now, go down to the bottom here. We're going to say, this is back under player equipment manager. Under the switching quick slot, we're going to say if selected item is equal to null, and the player inventory manager.quick slot item index is less than or equal to, we're going to say switch quick slot item again. Save that. Now go back to the player UI, Go to your quick slots. We don't have a number on our actual quick slot here on the main HUD, so we can't actually see how much we have. So I'm just going to paste the projectile count here and change the size a little bit and set it up here on our bottom little quick slot image. I'm going to like anchor it to the bottom right again. I'm just going to actually enable that first so I can kind of see how it looks. I'm not going to spend too much time on this again though, because this is just going to be developer UI. It's not going to look pretty. Just going to get the job done to show that the functionality is indeed working as intended. I strongly encourage you to definitely take some time, work on your UI. It really brings the game to life. So we're going to call this item count, disable it by default. Go to our HUD manager now, and let's go down here to where we actually have our variables here for our quick slots. Let's make a text mesh pro variable for the new quick slot item count. And we can call this quick slot item count. Now let's go down to where we actually set the quick slot item icon. So right above the projectile one, I believe. Yeah, here we go. Set quick slot item. Set quick slot item quick slot icon. Man, that is a mouthful. Quick slot item count is going to be equal to false if the item is null or if it has no icon. Just because you don't have to set it false if it doesn't have an icon. I just like doing that. Everything should always have an icon. And then we're going to say if the quick slot item is consumable, we're going to enable it. The count, and we're going to set the count. Otherwise, the count will be disabled. So we can say quick slot item count dot text is equal to. Then we can say quick slot item and it's get current amount. Now we got to pass a player. So if you're using netcode, there's a very easy way to always get your player because the local player can always be attained from the network manager. So we'll do that in a second. For now, we'll say else the quick slot item count is disabled. So to get the player from the network manager, let's go up here and say using unity.netcode at the top. Now, alternatively, you could just store this somewhere at the beginning of your game, especially after you load into the scene. And you can always have the local player that way. But if you want, you can just fetch it from here. So using unity.netcode, and actually I'm saying is that it probably is better to store it in one place, just a little bit neater, and always reference them in that one place. But for now, we're going to get it from the network manager, and then we're just going to reference the local player. So drag in our prefabs here now under under quick slot item count. Now we go into the scene here, and I were to add some items to my inventory. Let's go ahead and add where is the flask? There's the mana flask. And let's get the health flask. And I can't see it for some reason. I'm just going to type it up here, health flask. And now let's go to the menu, press start, equip, go down to quick slots. And then if I click on one of these, boom, we have our 2 flasks. Cool, working as intended. If I equip them, so let's equip 2. Yep, the count comes up. Let's get out of the menu and make sure they're there. Yes, they are. Although I jump after coming on the menu, I'll fix that eventually. So you can see here I have 2. It only cycles between the 2. It skips the empty slot. You can see when it goes to empty slot, it just goes right over it. I can drink, and there we go. And boom, it works. Switch. And there you go, guys. Now you have a way to actually equip your equipment for consumables through a menu, and you can use it and cycle through just like your weapons. All right, guys. So if there is a core feature you want to see that I've not implemented yet, please let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. Thank you all for joining me here again this weekend. I hope you all have a very lovely weekend. And as always, an immense thank you to my patrons. I am eternally grateful for your support, and it is because of you this series even exists. So you have my sincerest thanks. Okay, everybody. See you next week.